Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast. We're beginning a deep dive into a powerful internal habit that, more often than not, secretly sabotages productivity and business efficiency: the unrelenting, often toxic quest for perfection.
And this isn't just a discussion about managing individual stress or time. Strategically, for modern professionals, this topic holds huge value. The source material we're exploring today, it was authored by Felix Römer of SmartKeys.org, and it frames perfectionism not as a virtue, but as a deeply entrenched, a learned pattern that actively stalls momentum.
A learned pattern.
And this liability is just getting more and more exposed in the current future of work, where speed, strategic iteration, and leveraging rapid feedback are absolutely crucial for success.
Okay, let's unpack this. So we've got a clear mission to extract the practical tools, the smart keys, that allow you, our listener, to strategically embrace good enough and accelerate progress. We need to shift focus from endless marginal polishing to tangible, high-impact results.
And if we start by clearly defining the productivity barrier, we can see why this is such a strategic problem. Perfectionist habits are just so corrosive because they often tie an individual's self-worth directly to flawlessly executed output.
Right.
This fixation leads to, well, paralyzing delay, the setting of, frankly, excessive standards, and most damagingly, relentless self-criticism.
And the data really supports the severity of that internal pressure, doesn't it? The research links this pattern not just to stalled professional work, but to increased anxiety, burnout, and a statistically lower overall well-being.
Yes.
It's a tragedy of success. Even when a perfectionist achieves a win, the feeling is often clouded by the focus on the three small things that weren't quite right.
Exactly. And let's quantify the core economic and time cost, the opportunity cost here. When you are chasing that final, flawless 1% of results, you are often trading hours, valuable company resources, valuable cognitive load for tiny marginal gains that do not materially move the project forward.
Or improve the customer outcome. You're describing diminishing returns taken to a self-destructive extreme.
Precisely. That is just wasted effort. The fear of being judged for imperfection creates this vicious loop. Delay, doubt, excessive effort, and then the whole cycle steals your time and focus, increasing your cognitive load for zero strategic benefit.
That brings us to a crucial distinction, the one between striving healthily for excellence versus rigidly pursuing perfection. How do we practically draw that line? Because a lot of high achievers feel that their success is tied to their demanding standards.
What's fascinating here is that the difference isn't in the standard itself, but in the metric used to measure value.
Explain that.
Okay, so healthy high achievers measure progress by effort, by learning, and by celebrating small wins. They accept almost perfect as meaningful progress, a usable draft, a functioning prototype, and critically, they move on. Their focus is forward.
They get satisfaction from the process and the momentum.
Exactly.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because the opposite is true for the perfectionist. They are focused entirely on the rearview mirror.
Correct. Perfectionists treat those near misses, those almost perfect outcomes, as outright failure. They fixate on the flaws, not the function. They make the achievement feel hollow because they are measuring against an abstract, unattainable ideal instead of a clearly defined, functional goal.
And the sources note that those rigid standards become a self-reinforcing loop fueled by fear of judgment. That fear forces an obsession with over-control, fixation on minor flaws, and a defensiveness toward feedback, which makes collaboration difficult. It's this continuous, never good enough internal soundtrack.
And this self-critique ultimately sabotages productivity in extremely insidious ways, far beyond just the polish phase. It starts with the procrastination cycle. You delay tasks because the act of starting risks producing imperfect work or opening yourself up to criticism.
So the fear of being imperfect is the catalyst that triggers the initial delay, which creates anxiety, which then makes the task seem even bigger, leading to more delay. It's a textbook definition of self-sabotage.
And it absolutely crushes creative flow, too. When you impose unrealistic, rigid standards and embrace all or nothing thinking, you wait for the perfect moment or the perfect inspiration that never comes. The one wrong pixel scenario is the classic corporate example.
Tell us more about that one wrong pixel.
Okay, so it's the idea that a high-value creative project, say a full marketing strategy, gets starved of attention because the individual's spending 2 hours adjusting the font kerning or perfecting a minor graphic element that 99% of stakeholders won't even notice.
Wow.
Fixating on a tiny, inconsequential mistake starves the bigger strategic ideas of the attention they deserve, wasting real time and creative energy. It's focus displacement.
This sounds like a huge strategic vulnerability. I mean, if our goal is to increase speed and momentum in a competitive market, then the solution has to be iteration, not flawlessness. But how do we ensure that setting a good enough standard doesn't just lead to genuinely sloppy work and a decline in quality overall?
That's the critical point, and it's why the concept of strategic constraint is so important. If we connect this to the bigger picture for modern business, iteration speed is the ultimate key.
Yeah.
You must replace perfection checkpoints with progress checkpoints. The strategic insight presented in the source is foundational. Shipping a usable version early invites feedback and prevents hours of polishing in the wrong direction.
That is the ultimate time saver. Think about it. You could spend 20 hours making something flawless based on your initial internal assumptions, only to send it out and find out the client or customer needed something entirely different.
Exactly.
An imperfect draft sent at hour 2 would have captured that critical feedback and saved 19 hours of wasted polishing. The goal is validated progress, not just activity.
It's about leveraging those feedback loops early and often. This transitions us perfectly to the practical tools, the SmartKeys, that we can implement in our daily workflow. We need structural limits to protect our time and energy, turning that stuck, anxious energy into steady, reliable progress.
Let's dive into those tools, starting with time management and focus. How do we impose strategic limits when our internal voice is telling us to keep tweaking?
The primary tool here is time boxing. This means capping your effort using fixed blocks, say, a 25 or 50-minute sprint. Crucially, the instruction is to treat that slot as the only chance to move the thing forward today.
Yeah.
This forces decisive action.
And it works psychologically, right?
It does, because it decouples your self-worth from the time spent. If the timer runs out, the work stops, regardless of perceived flawlessness. The effort was successful simply because you followed the plan.
I appreciate that focus on structural enforcement. And to break the initial paralysis that I don't know how to start feeling, the source suggests using the 10-minute start anyway timer.
Yes. That short burst interrupts the procrastination cycle because it lowers the emotional stakes. 10 minutes is manageable. You prove to yourself that action beats waiting, and once you have momentum, you often bypass the perfectionist's gatekeeping.
Okay, so the second set of tools moves from timing to defining success. How do we structure the task to protect quality without chasing an ideal?
We need concrete boundaries. The rule is to define completion with 3 simple, measurable criteria before you even start the task.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If you are writing a proposal, your 3 criteria might be: 1, it answers the core request; 2, all data sources are cited; and 3, the target length is achieved. Once those 3 are met, the task is done.
That completely stops the second guessing later, and I really appreciate the practical limit on revisions.
Limiting revisions is essential to fight diminishing returns. The guidance is 2 passes. A first pass focused purely on structure and content, and a second pass focused purely on clarity and readability. That's it.
And then it's done.
Then you use a good enough checklist, which must focus on function, not polish. The 3 core criteria are clarity, completeness, and readability. If it hits those 3, it ships.
That shifts the focus entirely from chasing an abstract ideal to hitting measurable, functional criteria that actually matter to the business outcome.
Absolutely. And finally, we have to consider the relational impact and team alignment. If you are a high-achieving professional or a manager, your rigid standards held for others are the primary cause of micromanagement.
Which strains relationships and severely slows down teams. A perfectionist manager can be a bottleneck for the entire department.
A huge bottleneck. The strategy here is twofold. First, agree on those done criteria together with your team members to set clear, objective expectations and avoid friction.
Makes sense.
Second, when giving feedback, replace global, vague judgments like "this isn't quite good enough" with specific objective requests.
So instead of that, you'd say something like,
Use neutral language. This section needs one adjustment to align with criterion 2 instead of making it sound like a verdict on the person's capabilities.
that helps build an environment of acceptance and self-compassion, which ultimately lowers the cognitive load for everyone and speeds up the entire team's output. It turns feedback into coaching, not criticism.
Precisely.
Now, we've covered the external fixes, the time boxes, and the checklists. But the source material does a vital deep dive into the internal roots. How do we address the internal never good enough loop that starts the entire cycle?
This raises the most important question. We have to understand the source. The pattern often stems from very early life messages. specifically conditional approval from caregivers or external figures of authority.
So when praise is only given for perfect results.
You inadvertently learn to link flawless achievement to personal value. Effort then becomes a test of whether you are a good person or a valuable employee.
That means the key is identifying and mapping those common thinking traps, what psychologists call cognitive distortions. The source lists several: all or nothing thinking, the mental filter that only sees flaws, and the overuse of rigid should statements.
All or nothing thinking is particularly damaging, making an almost perfect result feel like a catastrophic total failure.
So we need tools to challenge those distortions in real time. The source advocates for the use of structured cognitive techniques, often drawn from cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT.
Yes, we call it the quick CBT check.
Yeah.
What's the specific thought that is causing anxiety? What concrete evidence supports it? What concrete evidence contradicts it? And most critically, what's a balanced, realistic alternative?
Let's walk through a common workplace scenario for our listener. Say they are stuck on a presentation slide deck because they feel the visual design is inadequate. The thought is, I can't possibly send this. The design isn't up to the standard of the CMO, and I'll look unprofessional.
That's a perfect example. Okay, thought. The design is inadequate and I will be judged negatively. Evidence supporting it. I've seen colleagues use flashier templates. Evidence contradicting it. The content is all accurate, the charts are clear and sourced correctly, and the primary goal of the presentation is data communication, not aesthetic display. Furthermore, I've never received feedback stating my design skills were a problem.
And the balanced alternative.
Instead of saying, if this is not perfect, I failed, the balanced alternative is, the presentation meets the main criteria of clarity and completeness. I am prioritizing impactful data delivery over high-end polish, and I can seek specific feedback on design elements in the next iteration.
It reframes the internal error message from a verdict on your worth to simple, actionable feedback for the next step. That reframing is everything.
Yes, you re-anchor your self-worth in effort and strategic progress.
And by setting clear markers like draft finished or feedback gathered, you make progress visible, reducing that crushing pressure.
And, integrating mindfulness techniques helps too. Practice simply noticing the harsh thought, that's the perfectionist talking, labeling it, and returning to the present moment. This calms the mind and reduces reactivity to the urge to fix every detail immediately, allowing the strategic constraint of the time box to hold firm.
Pulling it all together, the ultimate goal here is to link completion with success, rather than merely relief, and to measure achievements by strategic impact and progress, not just surface-level polish. This is a fundamental strategic pivot.
The final overarching principle is simple. Done is better than perfect, especially when perfect is strategically irrelevant to the outcome.
For our listeners, the final strategic takeaway is this. Commit right now to one low-risk, good-enough experiment. Run a 30-day dare-to-be-average test on a low-stakes task, maybe drafting internal memos or updating a weekly report. Use a fixed time box, like that 25-minute timer, and just let it go when the timer rings.
That small, controlled action serves as an A/B test on your own productivity system. It proves that momentum beats fear and helps you build steady, sustainable success. And one final crucial note. The source reminds us that if avoidance, persistent stress, relentless self-critique, or worry related to these standards impacts your daily functioning, your work performance, or your relationships, it is so important to seek professional care. Evidence-based options like cognitive behavioral therapy or structured mindfulness approaches are available and can greatly improve daily functioning and quality of life.
We hope this deep dive helps you swap endless polishing for steady, high-impact progress. Remember, treating mistakes as tuition and tracking time saved per task are practical ways to shift your professional focus from perfection to productive power.
Thank you for tuning in to the SmartKeys podcast.
If you found these strategic insights useful for boosting your work efficiency and reclaiming your time and energy, please subscribe to the SmartKeys podcast wherever you listen.
The full article, Overcoming Perfectionism, How Letting Go Can Boost Your Productivity, is linked in the show notes so you can explore all the practical steps we discussed and start your own good enough experiment today.